How's it going, people? Salmon Slabber here, and this is episode 5 of Runescape lore. We're finally moving off from the second age, although there is a bit more to cover. I'll come back to it eventually. But now we are finally going to start the third age. So, let's have at it. This is quite a big one. So, the third age, also known as the Age of War, is one of the 6 ages of Gielinor. The third age lasts roughly 4,000 years and officially begins when Zamorak, now as a god, returns from his banishment and begins the massive war. These god wars would last throughout the entire third age, and their end was marked by the establishments of the Edicts of Guthix, which is actually also when the third age ended. The god wars led to millions of deaths and the destruction of dozens of major settlements and cities, the near complete eradication of all references to Zaros, and the extinction of several races. Bandos also becomes massively active during this age. The god wars and the concurrent conflicts are by far the most notable events that happened during the third age. Although other things did actually occur during this time, for example the Void Knights were established during the third age, and the dwarves also founded Keldgrim, albeit as a result from fleeing from the war. So let's get into it a little bit then. The Gielinorian God Wars of the Third Age. The God Wars were an unimaginably extensive series of battles and conflicts covering the entirety of the Third Age, 4,000 years of war between gods. This time was a great time of calamity in Gielinor. They are the second known God Wars in history, and the first to rage upon Gielinor. Although over for thousands of years, they still have a major impact on the modern day life in nearly all sites of Gielinor, and are of great interest to archaeologists. A small faction of creatures from the war can still be found battling for the God Sword in a recently thawed out dungeon in the north, having been frozen in time. So, when did the Third Age officially start? Let's give you a little bit of backstory just in case you missed the last episode. During the Second Age, Zaros had almost complete dominion over the world. The areas that are now the Wilderness, Northern Misthalin, Northern Asgarnia and the northwestern portion of Mauritania formed the greatest part of his kingdom, and cities were constructed there. When he was betrayed and defeated by his Majorah general Zamorak, the Second Age ended and the other gods began ruling without interference. However, many gods, especially Saradomin and Zamorak, wanted complete control. During the ritual of the Majorah quest, Saradomin states that Zamorak had returned from his banishment as he wanted to repossess the Stone of Jazz, which Saradomin confiscated after Zamorak was banished. After Zaros' banishment, Zamorak quickly rounded up Zaros' remaining loyalist followers and destroyed his fortresses and cities. The majority were destroyed so quickly, with the exception of Sentistan, which held out for many hundreds of years. Sentistan was Zaros' capital. It was over 3 times the size of Varrock, and was believed to be placed at the heart of the dig site, now found just east of Varrock. The war escalated as the other gods, seeing an opportunity, attempted to seize control of previously Zarosian areas. Zamorak was unable to efficiently conquer and maintain his holdings due to the sheer speed with which he acted. The war further intensified, and by the time of the fall of Hallowvale, almost the entirety of Gielinor was in chaos. The gods, at the time, could directly interact with the world. This ability to interact with the world caused massive destruction far beyond any that had been seen before or after the wars. During the wars, countless civilizations, races, and animal species completely disappeared. They were just annihilated out of complete existence. Many were near obliterated, while others hid themselves or underwent drastic changes in order to survive. Much of the world itself was mutated, once healthy lands were ruined or reformed. Most of these changes were so devastating that they actually continue to affect Gielinor today. In fact, the entire world was on the brink of destruction. When the fighting awoke Guthix from his sleep at the end of the First Age, Guthix went to sleep into a deep slumber that stretched over many millennia. When he was awoken because of the God Wars, he found the world in ruin, and was so enraged that he instantly demanded that the gods stop fighting their wars on Gielinor, and to continue to hold influence through their followers. Most of the gods were banished from the land, although they continued to watch over it and hear prayers from their faithful. It was at this time that the Third Age, which has lasted approximately 4,000 years, finally ended. Guthix planted a massive sword inscribed with mysterious letters into the crater of a volcano in the centre of the destroyed Farinthi region, now known as the Wilderness. He did this as a warning to the other gods not to break his edicts. On the 28th of August 2007, a massive cavern that had been frozen for eons in the northern Troll country began to thaw due to tectonic movements in the wilderness. This cavern was the site of one of the God War's last battles. The monsters within have not realised yet that the God Wars are genuinely over, and thus continue to fight. Players are able to explore the dungeon, but it is extremely dangerous. Though it is a massive battle with hundreds of monsters and warriors fighting for their gods with no end in sight, it pales in comparison to the bloody carnage that was the Third Age. The Oracle mentioned, as long as the object the God Wars searched for remained hidden, the God Wars would remain dead. Now during the Third Age, there's many historical discrepancies, as it was a long time ago. So, some information is concrete, others not so much, but, from what has been gathered, is fairly reliable information. The true history of the God Wars is always somewhat difficult to determine. Having occurred several thousand years ago, information about the God Wars is difficult to come by. However, an even more hindering factor are the differences in accounts of the wars. A good example of this is Saradominus and Zamorakians often disagree on what truly occurred at the time. For instance, Saradominus, such as the Wise Old Man, would state that when the victory was nearly Saradomin's, he pitied the Zamorakians and allowed for a truce to be made. Zamorakians, on the other hand, though, insist that this was not the case, and have their own beliefs on the matter. However, most generally accept that it was actually Guthix who put an end to the God Wars. Another difficult subject are the Edicts of Guthix himself. The Edicts of Guthix were created by Guthix when he ended the wars. Some religious groups doubt their existence. Others, however, including many important religious advisors, such as Aonisig Reisfir, highly encourage the following of the edicts. This makes understanding them difficult, and has been the cause of many political disputes since their creation. The God Wars hosted many historical battles and events that shaped Gielinor to what we know today. Now, these next couple of points are confirmed events that took place during these wars, though there are probably many others that have long since been forgotten. Note that these events aren't in order, as there's no concrete evidence to say that they happened at X date. However, this is what I generally believe them to be in. So, starting up from the very beginning of the Third Age, Bandos finally arrives within Gielinor. Uza, at that time the largest city in the Caridian Desert, was besieged by Thamaron, an elder demon and chief lieutenant of Zamorak. Despite the clay golem's efforts to save the city, they were defeated, and Uza was destroyed. Thamaron, however, is severely wounded by an elite group of golems, and he's forced to flee the dimension. The wounds eventually prove to be fatal. Thamaron's remaining army is crushed by Azanadra soon after. The Dorgashan goblin tribe fled after refusing to fight in a battle which they could not possibly win. Trapped underground, they struggled for survival and managed to build a city now known as Dorgesh Khan, approximately 800 years before the end of the Third Age. A civil war erupted between the Republic and tribal Dorgeshan factions, but ultimately the Republic prevails, due to an earthquake that wipes out the opposing army. Akthanicus was tricked by Inakra into her temple, upon which Inakra traps Akthanos inside, and he becomes imprisoned. The followers of Zaros struggled against the fury of the gods that fought for control over Zarosian lands. Some followers of Zaros were forced to flee into the desert and live as bandits. Azanadra, the champion of Zaros, and a massively powerful Majara, was brought down and imprisoned in a pyramid. It is suggested the Zamorakian and Saradominus forces collaborated together to bring him down. After all, Azanadra was an immensely powerful foe. The wilderness during the Second Age was part of Zaros' expansive domain. Upon Zaros' defeat and the beginning of the God Wars, the wilderness became a centre of warfare as a multitude of races and factions attempt to lay waste to the remaining Zarosians. By the end of the wars, the wilderness, which had been a forested paradise previously, is permanently scarred by the war, and is barren of all but the most twisted of life forms. Lord Lawerniel Virgidiad Draken, a vampire lord, gained control of Mauritania. Because of his assistance in Zamorak's rebellion, southern Mauritania, the lush forest, also known as Hallowland, is quickly overrun by Draken's hordes of werewolves, vampires, and the undead. Queen Ephorede, the Ician queen of the area, surrendered after her husband, King Acerdes, is captured, giving Draken complete dominion over the land. He converts the area cities into large ghettos where inhabitants are farmed for blood. He captures the castle, now known as Castle Draken, and makes it his main stronghold. Southeastern Mauritania is renamed the Sanguinesti region. These events would later lead to the construction of the Patadermus and the death of 6 of the 7 priestly warriors. Count Draenor, the brother of Lord Dragon, sets his sight upon an area that's now known as Draenor Village. Although whether he gained control of the land during the 3rd or 4th Age is unknown, once separated from Mauritania in the 4th Age following the blessing of the River Selve, he was immensely weakened, to a shadow of his former self. The Barrows brothers led forces loyal to Saradomin into the heart of Mauritania, seeking to release the land from Dragon's control. However, the Barrows brothers were killed in battle and buried at the Barrows, only to be turned into spirits by the Majara Sliske. The Aviantes, a race of bird creatures devoted to Armadil, were completely wiped out. Armadil left Gielinor as a result of this. Several were frozen in a massive battle, now known as the God Wars Dungeon, and have recently defrosted. Dwarfs, after realizing that the wars could force their race to extinction, seal themselves beneath the world's surface, upon which they construct their capital, Keldagrim, which now exists even to this day. The dig site, now known at the time as Sentistan, was destroyed by the forces of Zamorak, but was claimed by Saradominus some years later. The wars ultimately destroyed Sentistan, but in its place, Saranthium is built. Sentistan was the largest Zarosian city. The construction of Saranthium is known to have taken place between 3740 and 3804. By the evidence on 2 coins you can find in the dig site. These are the only surviving records of dates from this age. Elvenkind all retreat into Profithinus, due to the danger of the lands beyond Arandar, the mountain range. Gnomes, much like dwarfs, are forced to flee beneath the surface of the world. Their capital, the Gnome Stronghold, was ruined and remained so until the 4th Age. Mother Malum, the Queen of the Sea Slugs, at this time attempted to conquer the world. However, she was narrowly stopped by the Saradominus Temple Knights, an organization which was actually founded during the God Wars. Haziel conquered the land that is now known as Ardone as part of his contract work with Zamorak. The Padewa, Karel, Lessa, Deriak, Karalanga, Anakal and Gorak fortresses are all Zarus' last remaining areas, and they were all destroyed during this time. A massive cavern known today as the God Wars Dungeon hosted a massive battle between followers of Bandos, Saradomin, Zamorak and Armadil. The cave was hidden during the battle, freezing the combatants thousands of years later. In the year 169 of the 5th Age, the combatants were unfrozen due to tectonic movement in the wilderness, upon which they resumed their battle as they tried to obtain the fabled God Sword. The Dagonoths emerge roughly during this time, upon which result in a great loss for the Fremennik tribes. Bandos leads his ogres into the Feldip Hills, quickly wiping out the local populace and claiming this land as his own, starting his empire. Worms, a species of ancient dragons much more powerful than any dragon known today, slowly begin to disappear from continued use in combat and evolution. A specific genus of worm, the white dragon, also disappears during this time. Wyverns, a species of flightless two-legged dragons, are believed extinct due to a massive climate shift. Their reanimated skeletons can only be found in the Asgarnian Ice Dungeon, the last remaining place that is cold enough for them to survive. Dragon ore, a type of metal found only in Runescape, is forged by the Dragonkin, which thereupon fell into the hands of several other races such as humans, fairies and implings. The knowledge of ancient magics, extremely powerful battle spells, were largely forgotten during this time, having been only used by a select few Zerosians. Their death resulted in the near extinction of these magics. However, the spells have resurfaced and have fallen into the hands of evil mages such as Solus Delega and Zenevivia. Contact with an underwater city was lost, with all memory of the city nearly vanishing from Gielinor completely. Few now remember it, save Guthix himself possibly. Amongst the greatest desert cities was Ulek, a settlement found in the cliffs and swamps of the southeastern desert. Shortly after Uza was attacked by Thamarong, Ulek was also besieged by Balfrog Kriath, a three-faced demon and the future bodyguard of Krill Suaroth. The few that escaped eventually took refuge in Sophanum, which was a small village at the time. The desert deities of the Menophites, also known as the Desert Pantheon, who had ruled the Caridian desert for countless years now, fell from power. Perhaps this was because of the large amount of combat that was taking place within the desert. Although they continue to hold sways in areas such as Menophos, their influence diminishes largely in the outside world, even leading some to doubt their own existence. Ubiusk was the original world of the goblins. Here they lived in peace for thousands of years until being discovered by Bandos. Bandos took them to Gielinor, despite the goblin resisting this, leaving their world in ruin. Once in Gielinor, they became his devoted warriors, referring to him as the Big High War God. Nezicanid, a black demon of massive proportions, may have been imprisoned in a cave beneath the Karazi jungle. During this time, although little is known of Nezicanid, it is likely that he was a servant of Zamorak, and was imprisoned by a small group of warriors, in all likelihood Saradominists. Many of the thousands that perished in the wilderness due to the ongoing wars between Zamorak and Saradomin and many others return as the dead. They return as revenants. These creatures terrorize the wilderness even after the God Wars end. They crazed broken minds filled with bloodlust, not able to die permanently. These creatures eternally haunt the wilderness. Dragontooth Island, a small forested land east of Mauritania, is used by Saradominists as an outpost. However, sometime during this era, they were brutally murdered by an unknown enemy, leaving much of the tale a mystery. Agrith Na, a powerful demon, was banished from Gielinor by Guthix upon his awakening. However, he still managed to influence Gielinor by controlling natural disasters. A large island north of Mauritania, commonly known today as Kudos Island, was ravaged by war. Many of the animal species unique to the island were entirely wiped out. These long extinct creatures are now being studied by the Varrock Museum, and the island itself is said to soon be reachable via barge. Sometime towards the end of the Third Age, the Fist of Guthix was formed shortly after Guthix returns to the surface. The manner in which it was created, though, is very well debated, and no one's got any concrete evidence to say otherwise. The town of Eastbridge was destroyed by intense fighting. Eastbridge was apparently a village settlement built on a small islet off the coast of an unknown region, although it was likely within one of the wooded areas that are now Misthalin, Asgarnia and Kandarin. It was occupied at one point by barbarian and rogue Tazar, forces during an unlikely alliance, but, however, it was later conquered. Consisting of small huts and central fortresses, Eastbridge was a key strategic point in the region, but unfortunately, it didn't survive the God Wars. At some point towards the end, Banos' race of great warriors, the Orgs, were destroyed. The myriad and unknown civilization that inhabited the areas of southern Misthalin since the First Age were destroyed by unknown forces. The light creatures are the last thing that remain from this ancient race. Now those are just some main points that happened during the Third Age. However, there is a lot more. In fact, there's quite a few major conflicts that are well documented during this time. As the God Wars, there were thousands of individual battles and conflicts between the people of Gielinor. Although many have been forgotten, some of the more significant ones, they are actually well documented. Please note that although these battles are basically in order, they may be at some point slightly out of place. I will cover these in separate videos, such as 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. There's quite a few, such as the fall at Sentistan, the destruction of the Seven Zerosian fortresses, the Farinthi campaign, the Dorgashan civil war, the Sea Slug conflicts, the fall of Hallowvale, the Mauritania campaign, the destruction of Uza, Northern Caridian Desert campaign, the Battle of Ardone, and finally the God Wars dungeon. The God Wars, after listening to all of this, were a bloody time made by battles. Because the land was ever changing from the constant battles which plagued surface, there were only a few long-standing cities. Occasionally, large camps would be created, but rarely did any significant settlement survive for long. Because of this, the Battle of the God Wars were more violent and bloody than any other. Everyone was pushed to fighting. There were very few civilians, as you say. The majority of battles were battles held on open land with makeshift defensive structures placed to protect soldiers. While some armies made use of strategy and cunning tactics to overcome their foes, others chose brute force. A good example of this is Bandos in particular. They were well known for their strength and brutality, making use of overwhelming numbers. Bandos' armies took no prisoners. The God Wars continue to have an impact on Gielinor today. Many of the lands that were seized by certain races in the God Wars are still generally under their rule to this day. Many areas, such as Feldip Hills and Mauritania, continue to be affected by their roles in the wars. The wilderness in particular has remained virtually unchanged since it was annihilated during the wars. The God Wars also serve as a historical reminder to the rulers of modern age. Since the Edicts of Guthix were put in place, there have continued to be countless battles indeed. The Fourth Age was a time of great violence between the world's races. The only thing that has prevented these from escalating into all-out wars are the Edicts themselves, which prevent large-scale attacks between different races and religious factions. Rulers must be careful to abide by these. For instance, King Roald III of Varrock is currently faced with a difficult situation. the werewolves of Mauritania have begun to kidnap travellers near the pachydermis to appease the blood tithes for the vampires. However, the king cannot launch a full-scale assault, as doing so could result in another god war and the annihilation of the world. Some wish to circumvent the edicts or remove them completely, including a number of splinter groups currently operating near the pachydermis temple. The God Wars then could be seen as Gielinor's equivalent of nuclear war in the real world, with no apparent winners, yet many losers. Excavations are also being performed in the search for relics from these ancient times. This is a difficult task, however. The God Wars did occur over 4,000 years ago, so nearly all the artifacts during this time have been annihilated or destroyed. Furthermore, there were few permanent structures during the time, leaving us with very little understanding of the architecture, literature, or any other cultural aspects of the age. Fortunately, there is a considerable amount of armour that has survived within the earth, and in some areas, pottery and other such relics can actually be found. The largest excavation currently underway is being performed by the Varrock Museum at the dig site east of Varrock, which was once the Zerosian capital of Sentistan, and later on, Saranthium. Other smaller digs are also underway, such as the one performed by the Dorgeshan. Recently they discovered a large number of artifacts from the Dorgeshan Civil War, while they were helping the dwarfs to build the Dorgesh Khan Keldgrim train system. So, with that said, that pretty much covers a massive amount of information on stuff that happened during the Third Age. I hope you all found that interesting. The next episodes will probably be 5.1 and most likely covering the fall of Sentistan, what actually happened during the time. And we'll get in a little bit deeper of some of the massive conflicts that happened during the Third Age. So, I hope you're all looking forward to it. If you like this video, please give it a like, tell your friends about it. And, with that said, I will catch you all later. Have a good one.